Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and really try to pull out the most important insights just for you. Today, we're tackling a question that, well, it might surprise you, especially if you've thought about the U.S. Capitol. Why isn't Washington, D.C. a state?
Right.
I mean, it's home to over 700,000 people.
More than Wyoming or Vermont.
Exactly. And it even has its own mayor, its own city council. So what's the actual deal with this unique status? Our mission in this deep dive, really, is to explore the history behind it, look at the U.S. Constitution, touch on the politics involved.
Always politics.
Always. And maybe look at potential future changes regarding D.C.'s place in the Union. We want to unpack why this situation exists and, what it actually means for the people living there and for American democracy itself.
Okay, let's jump in. So to understand why Washington, D.C. isn't a state, we really have to go way back, late 1700s.
Yep, right after the Revolutionary War.
The Founding Fathers, they're setting up the new government, and they know they need a capital city, a central place.
But did they have a specific idea beyond just, picking a spot on the map?
Oh, absolutely. The founders had a really crucial, almost, you could say, philosophical reason for wanting a distinct capital.
Okay.
They were very aware of the potential for undue influence if the seat of government was inside an existing state.
Ah, like New York or Pennsylvania?
Exactly. They worried that states' interests could sway national policy.
Right.
So the goal was truly neutral ground, a place where the national interest would be, paramount, free from any one state's pull.
And they actually put that into action pretty quickly.
They did.
1790, Congress passes the Residence Act.
That's the one.
Officially setting up this brand new capital right there on the Potomac River.
And the land itself was specifically carved out. It was territory donated by both Maryland and Virginia.
Right. They gave up land for it.
And it wasn't just some committee decision either. George Washington himself was directly involved in picking the exact spot.
Wow. Okay.
And by 1800, the government officially packs up and moves into this new federal district, the District of Columbia.
So how did they, lock this unique status into the Constitution itself? What's the actual language they use?
Okay, yeah, that's Article 1, Section 8. That's the key bit.
Article 1, Section 8.
It explicitly gives Congress the power to create a district capped at 10 miles square to be the seat of government.
Okay.
And crucially, it says Congress has exclusive legislation over it.
Exclusive legislation. What does it really mean in practice?
It means D.C. doesn't belong to any state. Congress is directly in charge. Full stop. This really reinforces that original idea.
Yeah.
It was never designed to be a state. It was meant as independent, neutral federal ground.
But, they probably didn't foresee hundreds of thousands of people living there eventually, right? Under that clause.
Probably not. That constitutional design, it makes sense on paper for neutrality, but then people actually started living there.
Right. Building lives, families, businesses.
Exactly. And that immediately created this tension, this friction with the original vision.
And how did that show up first?
Well, it became the core problem over time. You have people in D.C. paying taxes, serving in the military, just like citizens anywhere else.
Sure.
But they had no voting representation in the Congress that, remember, has exclusive legislation over them.
And that led directly to the phrase on the license plates.
Taxation without representation. Precisely. It's not just some, clever slogan.
Yeah.
It's a direct echo of the American Revolution, a fundamental challenge.
But this time, it's internal, within the Capitol itself.
Exactly. It forces you to ask, is that principle, no taxation without representation, truly universal?
Yeah.
Or does the federal district get an asterisk?
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. From those origins to today.
Right.
We've got this significant population now, around 700,000 people, again, more than Vermont or Wyoming.
Yep.
But they still face these really stark limitations.
They do.
No voting members in the House or the Senate. Zero say in national laws that affect everyone, including them.
And not just national laws.
Right. Their own local laws can be overturned by Congress.
Congress retains the power to override D.C. laws. So decisions made by the city's elected mayor and council, Congress can just say no.
So what representation do they have? Anything?
Well, there is the non-voting delegate in the House. Currently, that's Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Okay, a non-voting delegate.
Yeah.
What can she actually do?
She can speak on the House floor. She can propose legislation, serve on committees, which is, important for getting D.C.'s issues heard.
But the key word is non-voting.
That's the critical part. She cannot vote on the final passage of bills. It's a voice, yes, but ultimately not a vote where it counts most.
Now, there was some progress, right? The 23rd Amendment in 1961.
That gave D.C. residents the right to vote for president.
Which sounds big, but is it enough if you still don't have representation in Congress? Some might call it symbolic.
It was definitely a crucial step. Before that, they couldn't even vote for the president. Imagine.
Wow.
So it recognized them as citizens in that one aspect. But you're right, full congressional representation is still missing.
And that's what really fuels the statehood movement today.
Absolutely. It's the core driver.
Okay, so this brings us right into the statehood debate. The supporters have a pretty clear argument.
Yeah, it's straightforward.
Residents pay federal taxes.
That's right.
They serve in the military.
Okay.
So they should have the same full voting rights as citizens in any state.
Makes sense on a fairness level.
They've even proposed a name, Washington, Douglas Commonwealth.
Honoring Frederick Douglass, yeah.
And the House has actually passed statehood bills, 2020, 2021.
Several times recently, yes. But they've always stalled in the Senate.
Okay, so what are the main roadblocks? What are the arguments against statehood that stop it in the Senate?
Well, the objections kind of fall into a few buckets. Some opponents raise constitutional concerns.
Going back to Article 1, Section 8.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Arguing D.C. was meant to be separate, constitutionally, and making it a state would violate that original intent.
It's like testing if that 18th century framework fits the 21st century reality.
It really is. Can a document designed when the capital was, basically an empty federal zone, adapt to a city of 700,000?
What else do opponents say?
Then there's the political argument. Let's be frank.
Okay.
D.C. voters lean heavily Democratic. Granting statehood would almost certainly mean 2 more Democratic senators.
So it's seen as potentially tipping the balance of power in the Senate.
That's a major factor in the opposition, yes. And some also worry about federal overreach or messing with the government's neutrality if the capital itself becomes a state.
But it's not just statehood or nothing, right? Are there other ideas on the table?
There are alternatives discussed, yeah. Try to find a middle ground, perhaps.
Like what?
One idea is retrocession. Give most of D.C.'s residential land back to Maryland.
So residents would vote as Marylanders?
Essentially, yes. They'd get full representation through Maryland's delegation.
Interesting. Any other ideas?
Another concept is to shrink the federal district down to a tiny core.
Just the essential federal building.
Right, like the Capitol, White House, Supreme Court, the mall, maybe. Keep that as the neutral federal zone.
And the rest becomes?
The rest becomes the new state. Washington, Douglas Commonwealth.
So you get statehood for the residents, but maintain a small federal district.
That's the idea behind that proposal.
Yeah.
But you can see, none of these are simple fixes, legally or politically.
Definitely a political minefield, as you said. Okay, before we wrap up, let's touch on some of those, surprising facts or historical quirks about D.C.
Oh, yeah. There are quite a few.
Like the fact that D.C. wasn't always the size it is now.
Right. In 1846, the land that Virginia had originally ceded.
South of the Potomac.
Yep, that land was actually given back to Virginia.
And that's now Arlington and Alexandria.
Exactly. So the capital's footprint has actually changed over time. It's not set in stone.
Huh. I didn't realize that.
And, even things like building monuments. Remember the Washington Monument?
Yeah, it took forever to build, didn't it?
Decades. And part of those delays were tangled up in these very questions of governance, funding, and who had control over the district. It shows how this unique status impacts even, physical development.
And speaking of control, getting home rule was relatively recent too, wasn't it?
Very recent, historically speaking. 1973.
So before 1973, Congress had even more direct say over purely local D.C. matters.
Much more. Budgets, city ordinances, everything pretty much needed congressional sign-off. Home rule gave D.C. the power to elect its own mayor and council and manage most local affairs.
Most, but not all, since Congress can still override.
Still retains that ultimate authority, yes.
And, circling back to those license plates, taxation without representation. It really is such a striking detail. It's like this constant quiet protest.
It really is. A silent but very bold statement you see driving around every single day, constantly reminding people of the core grievance.
So I guess that really sums up the core tension we've been diving into.
I think so.
Washington, D.C. was specifically designed by the Constitution to be this independent federal district separate from the states.
For neutrality originally.
Right. But as its population grew, the demand for full representation, for basic democratic rights for its citizens, grew right alongside it.
And that demand is stronger than ever today. So the debate over its future, whether statehood, retrocession, or something else, It's right at the center of American political discussion.
Yeah.
And this whole conversation really, it tests the adaptability of the Constitution, doesn't it?
In what way?
It makes us grapple with how founding documents, written over 200 years ago, apply to today's demographics, today's understanding of democracy and citizenship. What does full citizenship really mean in practice now?
That's a really powerful point. It leaves us with a lot to think about. So what does DC's ongoing struggle for representation tell you, the listener, about that foundational American promise of no taxation without representation in our modern democracy? What questions does it raise about citizenship, about power, and maybe about how our whole system of government might need to evolve?
Yeah, something to definitely mull over.